Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this cabinet meeting. Thank you for turning out on a cold evening. We'll start with apologies for absence, which I think is just Councillor Longley. Do you have any other apologies? No, that's great. Thank you. Can I ask if any cabinet member wishes to make any declaration of interest of any item on this evening's agenda? Okay.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon, Mike. Yeah.
Sorry, I've got that. On the item relating to Windflower Place, it's a personal interest in that the owner of the neighbouring property lives in my ward and has been in touch with concerns over it. So, personal interest only.
Thank you. We can now declare it. That's good.
Talking about car parking on the blue badge holder.
Okay, so reference the item on car parking, Bill declaring that he's a blue badge holder. Challenge. Okay, that's declarations of interest. We also have some minutes, which is of our previous meeting, and that previous meeting was on the 20th of December. Can I just ask members if they've had a chance to review the minutes, if they'd like to suggest any corrections or amendments to those minutes? Therefore, propose that we
approve, Chair.
Thank you, Phil, for your proposal. Is that agreed? We confirm the minutes. Thank you very much. Yeah, I have no particular shares and announcements to make this evening. Not aware of any urgent business having been agreed or going forward. Item 6, report from Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We have one of our chairs, that's the chair of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny, Councillor McCord. Just want to give a quick verbal update on a number of the points that the committee are working.
Jonathan. Just a couple of things, because they were relevant and of interest and have been mentioned here at previous cabinet meetings. So last night the corporate committee met, and we had a couple of items on the agenda that were of interest. The Revs and Revenues and Benefits Service did present a report. We said, given a comment before that expressed some concern. What was particularly good, well, it was an evidence-based report as of the end of October, I believe, for all the figures. But I would recommend that all members just read it and take some comfort from the fact that the service is not a mess. Far from that, they set out what their future plans were. There was about a page and a half of achievements and things that have been done since vesting day. But all the indicators that we looked at, council tax collection, non-domestic rate collection, etc., were all better now than they were when they found on vesting day. So all of that was quite good. There are one or two issues on vacancies and systems and things that were also highlighted, but there is plans in place to get that. So I think I don't want to detain you any longer, other than just to say to members, have a read at it. It's on the agenda, and you'll see a good detailed report. And likewise, there was a task and finish group, which had been set up and had been running for many months, looking at treasury management under the chair of Danielle. So thank you, Danielle, for that. They made no specific recommendations to cabinet, but other than to say that again, we have a policy. The policy is being followed. There was some concern raised about strengthening the ESG, which is environment, social and governance sections of it. But on the advice of Martin, he says that the CIPCA are working on giving updated advice to all councils everywhere, and once we get that, then it'll go through the policy of presumably cabinet or even full council reviewing treasury management, and then we can, again, happy to put that back on the agenda later on in the year once that comes up. But just those two things, and I think cabinet can get some reassurance from scrutiny, having looked at them, and then we can put those issues to bed and move on.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ian. That's tremendous. Glad to attend your committee last night. That was an excellent update, as you said. Reverend Baines, a great report for the work that's going on the treasury management strategy and so on. Any questions for Councillor McCord or any of the work that's going to be committee? Brilliant. Ian, thank you very much indeed. Right, that's great. Takes us on to our first key report, which is Public Health and Integrated Care Board. Just to flag up, as everybody will have noticed, we have 20 items for this evening's meeting. That's quite a heavy agenda. We have 30 separate speaking slots booked, so 3 minutes apiece. If we can stick to 3 minutes, we are in for an hour and a half of speakers plus the report time. I say that just to emphasise that whether you're participating or whether you're listening, once we get to about 9 o'clock, I think most of us have had enough. So I encourage concise points, please. If you're with party groups, perhaps just check that you're not doubling up on points and so on. If the points have been made by previous speakers, please don't hesitate to say that those points have. Let's move on to that report. This one comes from both Fiona and Matt. I think, Fiona, do you want to say a few words of introduction on it first? We have then got two speakers, Councillor Emma Roberts, Councillor Daniel Stan. Yeah, shall we? Let's try it that way.
Okay, no problem. Public health and the integrated care programme for children and young people's community health and wellbeing services 0 to 19. The current contract with NHFT to provide 0 to 19 services includes the 0 to 19 public health nursing service, which is a mandated service funded through the Public Health Ring Fence Grant, youth counselling services, which are provided by the REACH Collaborative, 5 community organisations delivering across the county. 0 to 5 universal non-clinical service is provided by Strong Start across Northamptonshire. The current arrangements are through a partnership between WNC and NCC, no, I'll start again. WNC, NNC and ICB through a Sections S75 agreement with NHFT as the service provider. ICB therefore lead the S75 arrangements with NHFT on behalf of the partners. The current contract ends in March. WNC and NCC Public Health Services jointly intend, subject to Cabinet approval, to ask the ICB to continue the S75 arrangement and through it to extend the contract with NHFT up to 2 years. During the desegregation of public health into WNC and NNC, it was decided that NNC would continue to lead on the 0 to 19 arrangements for public health during any extension period. Given this lead role, the failure of NNC to agree its own position on the extension is a risk, so we're pointing out risks for you. The plan proposed to Cabinet would allow us to ensure improved contract monitoring before recontracting in 2025. So we're proposing an extension period during which time the following will take place. Both Council Public Health Services will allocate staff to promote transparent contract management. A comprehensive 0 to 19 needs review, including seeking the voice of young people and families, will be conducted. This would inform the future re-tendering of the 0 to 19 contract. Options for alternative providers will be developed. This market making cannot be done by April 23. We will consider contractual options beyond the extension period. So the recommendation to Cabinet is that we agree that delegated authority be given to the Director of Public Health in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Public Health and Wellbeing and the Director of Finance to extend the Section 75 agreement or the equivalent public sector agreement for up to 2 years with Northamptonshire Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust, in partnership with North Northants Council and Northamptonshire Integrated Care Board, to jointly commission 0 to 19 public health nursing services and a range of health commission services supporting children and young people in West Northants from April 23 to March 25. That's 2025. Or an earlier end date, or if an earlier end date is required. Agree that delegated authority will be given to the Director of Public Health in collaboration with the Director of Children's Services and Cabinet Member for Public Health to agree future governance arrangements for this service with the ICB. That's the recommendation. It's absolutely vital that we keep this service going for these young people. So if we need to extend this contract in order that we can look how we can make the improvements that we all want to make for the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Matt, as a joint report, do you want to add some comments?
No, just to support, the report, and hope we can agree to it. As Councillor Blake mentioned, it's an important service, and this helps us get our West London situation in order to progress it in the future.
Great, thank you, Matt. Let's take our two speakers on this, which is first of all, Councillor Roberts. Emma, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, critical report, clear the decision's got to be made. I just had some questions around some points that were made in the report. Paragraph 1.7, there's a term, I think it said to encourage interest from the market. I didn't really understand what interest are we encouraging and from what market, where we're getting people involved. I was concerned that that was pushing more work outwards rather than retaining the service inwards. And I didn't understand how the continuation of the agreement might impact on the lapse. There was no mention of how that will feed back into local area partnerships. And I didn't know if we had a mapping provision, I'm calling it a mapping provision across the service provision across WNC, because certainly if you take the Strong Start provision, no criticism of them, by the way, but it's really sporadic as to where that's provided and which of our areas get access to those services. So there was nothing in here that said we're going to do that with this money. We're going to understand that. There's obviously a scrutiny report expected. I don't know where we're at with it on the child and adolescent mental health services, and I didn't know whether that report might be making any recommendations which might impact this report. So that was just a request really to make sure that we look at that, see if it does, if we need to. There's no quality impact assessment with any of the reports. We've not been seeing them for some time. They've now been split out. There's very little reference in here as to the impact this critical service provides. There's no EIA, and I wonder whether or not an EIA has been done, and we really do need one for the provision of this service. It feels like a report like this that an EIA is essential. And then as it's a service that's north and west, I wasn't sure about the funding numbers on the on page 18, but it's 7.1, whether that amount was our public health grant or all the public health grant, and whether or not excuse me, and whether or not that was our portion or a shared portion. Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant, thank you, Emma. Some good points. Whilst officers think about it, I can tell you that Rosie, our chair of scrutiny, was nodding enthusiastic when you said, well, scrutiny will be looking at this and reporting it back. If we may, should we go to our next speaker, and then we'll sweep up any questions that we can. Thank you ever so much, Chair. Which is Councillor Stone, Danielle.
Can I say it?
Yeah, do. I think that'd be a good time to over.
Thank you. I was in the report, and of course I agree with the recommendations, and I have got a couple of things I want to comment on. If you would like to use the Youth Summit, the 10th of November 2024 and 23 as an occasion to consult young people, they're always passionately interested in mental health issues and other issues to do with health. You're very, very welcome to do that. I'm just wondering about the cost. The cost, particularly the REACH programme, seems to me to be really modest, given the seriousness of the crisis we're facing with youth mental health issues. And I'm just wondering how realistic those costings are going to be for the next few years. I'm a bit worried about us still talking about the market as if we are going towards something that's already there and already satisfactory. I keep saying, and I really think we ought to take it on board, that we need to be shaping the market, not following it. And we ought to be dictating exactly what it is that we're needing. I totally agree that we need equality of information out of all the areas that we serve. This is the most important one, where we understand where the young people are, who they are, what their needs are. so that we can best judge if those needs are being met. Yeah, those are the things. Oh, the last thing I wanted to talk about is the difference between co-production and commissioning. I don't think you can put commissioning and co-production in the same sentence. I was at an LGA finance conference last week, and they were making it really clear that they were expecting local authorities to move away from commissioning because it's really not a cost-effective way of doing things. It's a really expensive way of doing things. It burns people's time, it burns people's money, and they were again encouraging us all to do co-production and co-delivery so that we move away from a commissioning approach.
Thank you very much indeed. A few points there. I don't know if you want to sweep them up. Stuart, you were indicating that you might, or right, tag team approach. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll try to make a note of the kind of questions that you've done. So the point around creating a level of interest in the market is orientated around the fact that the current providers have this contract for a considerable period of time. There are other NHS organisations who might be interested in it. There are other options afforded to us in the delivery of the service. But because it's sat with the existing provider for such a significant period of time, we haven't necessarily had those dialogues with alternates. So we're not trying to prejudge the outcome of what might be a procurement exercise potentially in 2 years' time. I think in relation to the activity of understanding demand across the delivery of these services will allow us to ensure that we have got proportionality provision to meet such demand. And again, that needs to be a key feature of that activity over 2 years. I think increasingly we will see the local area partnerships being a cornerstone of constructing everything that we do in these types of contracts. And we do business through the dialogue with the existing provider, even through the next 2 years, we would have an expectation that they start to orientate their activity around the local area partnerships. From an equality impact perspective, we're not proposing to make any changes through this decision. So this decision in effect is neutral from an equality impact assessment perspective. We will be obviously taking forward equality impact assessments on any changes that we make to the contract. Sally, do you want to pick up the funding? Sorry.
Yeah, so the funding in the part relates to the West and Northamptonshire portion, the total contract. The mention of youth summit as part of the work of the next year, what we do need to do is really start for a needs assessment and a lot of engagement with children and young people and their families as part of that. So the opportunity to take something to the youth summit would be really, really welcome.
Sorry, Sam, could you move the microphone a little closer? Thank you so much.
Sorry, I'm just saying that the opportunity to, as part of the engagement that we need to do, we need to do an awful lot of engagement over the next year, you know, to do the needs assessment properly. It will be really helpful to go to the youth summit as well as part of that. I think that covers all the points. I'll take the point on board at the end about the co-production.
Great. Any other queries from cabinet members? Anything on this one? No? Okay. Remember that I direct your attention to the recommendations as always at section 3. I just ask you to confirm your agreement. Is that agreed? Great. Thank you very much indeed. Takes us on to item 8. This one is with Matt, Public Health Framework. We then have 3 speakers, Councillor Rosie Humphreys, Wendy Randall, and Councillor Danielle Stone. So Matt, over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chairman. So this is the Public Health Framework 22-23 and 23-24. So the framework sets out the approach and priorities of West Northamptonshire for the use of the public health grant and its associated reserve. The framework is designed to ensure the governance processes are clear and transparent, and that colleagues and partners are aware of these processes as well as the conditions of which grant is awarded against. So there is currently a grant allocation of £19.1 million for West Northampton Council and approximately £10 million pound available from the reserve. A review of how some of the grant spent is underway with a strong shift in focus on the investment into prevention, which I think is a really positive approach. A plan for the second, for the spending reserve has been identified in the key areas that will be focused on our adults in early years around wellbeing and prevention, wider determinants of health, around housing, homelessness, and anti-poverty, the environment, and communities and health improvement. And the projects outside of the prescribed public health business, a business case approval process has been set up with a hierarchy of approval diagram to demonstrate the approval lines. I just want to commend the work of the Western Counties Public Health team. We've only been a team since October last year, and one of my first conversations with Sally was to put a challenge, I guess, out to make sure, or to see what we can do about getting public health embedded across the whole of the county. I think the team have been involved in some of our really positive work around the anti-poverty work, the lack of work, and the framework for the ICS as well. So we're off to a really good start, and I think using this framework that we've got here, the outcomes framework, using this framework that is, suggests that we're going to try and do everything to the best of our abilities, have the right governance around it, and puts us in a good position moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Let me add, I agree with you. I think we start to really see public health bar on all cylinders, which is great. Let's take our speakers now. May Councillor Rosie Humphries. Rosie, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this important report on the priorities for public health expenditure for 2024. My question really is whether the non-prescribed services, which include tackling obesity and physical activity, could be related to funding for active travel. The report says there's an opportunity for the framework to positively impact on the climate through promoting public health and wellbeing initiatives with a positive environmental impact, such as promoting physical activity. Just a reminder, our area produces more CO2 emissions per capita than the national average. In our rural areas, we'll have to drive as buses are unreliable or non-existent, and cycling in rural areas is hazardous. We're aware from another report in this meeting that on the agenda that by 2043, the number of over 65s in Western Hampshire will increase by 45%. So it's imperative now for there to be structures in place for the ageing population to age well, and access to physical activity is one of the most important determinants. So my question really is, would active travel come under one of the eligible funding? Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. Perhaps should we send the questions that we've got next to two more speakers? Shall we ask Councillor Randall, Wendy to come up next? Go through all the questions after that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll make it very brief. There is a section in there about the supplier market, in-house or to buy. And I noticed further on in the papers, we're looking at disposing some of our assets. And obviously, as we've just heard, the population is going to be ageing going forward. And I'm concerned that maybe we're going to be selling off assets that could be used in the future as, possible, nursing homes or somewhere where people are going back for rehabilitation. And then obviously we've started the pilot scheme on our laps now, and going forward, if they identify different needs, are these going to be able to be adapted within these contracts? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And then final speaker is Councillor Stone. Danielle, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the framework. It's really important, and I thank you very much for that. I think we've got issues though, haven't we? Because we're looking at a shortage of health visitors and school nurses, and we desperately need them as part of the strategy to keep our families and children healthy. There's no mention that I could find, I might have missed it, so forgive me if I have, no mention of social prescribers. And I just wanted to pick up on what Councillor Humphries was saying. Country parks and open spaces are really, really important for us. And I think we should have a mechanism where we're encouraging people, particularly in urban areas, particularly families who live in flats, particularly schools that service a lot of disadvantaged young people, to get out there more and use those spaces. And again, I think this is another example of where two different parts of our local authority are pulling against each other, but I would like to see much more an emphasis on how we can enable greater use of those spaces. And we know that families who need the most are getting poorer and poorer, so they've got issues around access. And that's one of the reasons why we need equality impact assessment, so that we are really clear about what's going on that level. I'm really keen to see much more collaborative working across the services. Public health underpins everything else. So housing, but another example might be a place where we know uneven pavements and poor lighting is the cause of lots of trips and falls and hospitalisations that should have been unnecessary if we had better pavement. I'm also quite curious about where the HAP is going to be sitting now. I can't find any mention of the HAP in your framework.
Okay, thank you very much. And there are a few things cropped up from our district. Shall we see what we can answer at the moment? Maybe someone responds to you later. Stuart, will you answer chipping or?
I can do so. So Councillor Randall, apologies, I think the question pertains to the care home paper rather than the public health framework. So I'll endeavour to answer those in the book. That's okay. Councillor Stone, the previous cabinet report where we talked about the 0 to 19 contract renewal, it's within that contract that we will be working with our partners around trying to deal with those issues, particularly in health visitor vacancies. I think the work today, we've already started to collaborate, particularly through Councillor Alan Brown's portfolio and with Stuart Timmins, around how we do bring that kind of use of local green spaces together with kind of our intentions to kind of work with the public around improving their kind of health outcomes. Sally, do you want to pick up that to travel?
I mean, purpose of the framework, it sort of goes back to the point that Councillor Gold made on in the introduction. The public health sort of spreads across everything that a local authority does. Not everything, whether it's active travel, leisure, housing, all relates to the health and well-being of residents. So the reason for the framework is to make sure that we've got a really good sort of governance process, but that we also allocate funding against the sort of priorities of the council that are going to really get that change. So active travel is a really good example of a theme that really improves the health and well-being of residents. What we've got to do, particularly with the public health grant, is to be able to show that we're getting the outcomes. So, I'm aware that a lot of authorities do use public health funding towards active travel programs, along with other funding, from other sources. So it's really possible to do that. We might choose to use the public health funding in the context of active travel to really concentrate on certain communities. So, we know that we're inequalities in some communities that don't want to engage in active travel. So we might choose public health funding for that sort of action. Really, it's possible to do that. The framework helps us to sort of re-look at the grant we've got and realign it to make sure we're using it in the best way. I don't think that answers the question. And then just going on to Councillor Stone's question, so we already do fund an element of social prescribing within the current budget, and we absolutely can, use it to ensure that residents get access to healthy environment, parks and things like that. So the framework will help us to make sure we get the best use out of the grant, and we also use the reserve that we've got wisely as well. In terms of the holiday activities, we're talking about here, aren't we? So we do get additional funding for that. At the moment, that is commissioned through the Children's Trust. So, you know, it is a separate stream of funding to the grant. But I think it's obviously a really important part of, you know, holiday activities, linking it to the anti-poverty work as well. So, you know, it's the same sort of principle, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, just on the point, Daniel was talking about the able use of spaces, and I think Stuart's comment around the lab work underpins a lot of you know, all of the public health work and lots of other areas of council. But I think once we get to understand what makes up challenges of the different labs, we can put interventions and encourage people, like we've started to do in the N4 lab, to you know, get an understanding of what the real issues are, and you know, help people along to why they become more active. Whether that involves using making more use of the country parks, or you know, getting more active. And I think we've got commitments certainly in the public health team and other areas of the council to get right behind that. So I'm really pleased to present today.
Thank you. Fiona.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that somebody, might have been Danielle, or I can't remember, so I apologise for that, said about integrating public health through all our services. Certainly, I'm just speaking obviously for my own service, but for my service, I think that over the time that Sally's been with us, public health has been far more integrated into what I'm doing than I've ever noticed before. And she has representatives that come along to all of our decisions and puts their views forward and has a really active role to play in that, which I haven't seen in the past. So I think that we are actually on a big starting point of getting public health integrated into all that we do in council, which is a good thing.
Thank you, Fiona. Any other comments or questions from members of the cabinet? No? Okay, great. In which case, as always, the recommendations are at section 3. Just ask you to confirm your agreement. Is those recommendations agreed? Join them. Thank you. Takes us on to item 9. This is Care Home Services Commissioning. So we have 2 speakers, Councillor Humphreys and Councillor Roberts. We'll first go over to Matt just to make some introductory comments. Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So Western Council Care Home Market is currently commissioned for a DPS arrangement made up of 17 providers expected to meet 100% of the demand for people aged 5 years and over. This DPS expires on the 30th of April 2023, following 2 extensions already. There is no framework in place to meet the demand for adults aged under 65. Therefore, spot providers are being used to meet the demand and fill the gaps in the market. Commissioning from such a large and fragmented volume of providers is undesirable and leads to inefficiency, additional quality risks and costs. The volume of providers from which WNC commission also leads to the loss of opportunity from economies of scale. It is the council's priority to deliver a sustainable fee structure for both the local authority and for the independent care market. So therefore, our intention to recommission a new care home direct purchasing system framework which meets the needs of individuals and recognises the requirements of adults aged 18 and above, including people with PD and MH conditions, not included learning disabilities. And it's introduced from May 23, and Commission is required to give dedicated authority to Stuart to recommission care home services. And this hasn't gone through open scrutiny, as it's a relatively straightforward transaction request. Thank you on that.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. That's terrific. 2 speakers then. First of all, Councillor Humphreys. Rosie, over to you.
Thank you. I welcome this important report regarding the new DPS for purchasing commission care home services. I've just got one very quick question about Appendix A, the residential and nursing care market profile. The CQC ratings in our area are 52% good, 8% outstanding, 32% requiring improvement, 4% inadequate, and 4% not yet inspected. I just wanted to know how that compares with national ratings. Thank you. That's all. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Councillor Roberts, Emma.
Thank you. We have a DPS system, so we need this report. We need this recommendation to go through. Whether we should have a DPS system is a different debate. But there's a couple of points in the report that I wanted to highlight. So in the recommendations, the duration of the DPS will be indefinite with no proposed end date. When you delegate an authority to a director and you've got no proposed end date for DPS, no disrespect to Stuart intended by this at all. But I think that's a little bit concerning for me. On page 49, 6.10, I think that what we've done is we've taken the anti-poverty comments that were made in the last report around care commissioning, which we all said were brilliant, and we put them in here, but actually they don't relate to this report because they talk about supporting family life at home, and this is a care home provider, not supporting family life at home. So just think we need to be, yes, it was great that we'd addressed the anti-poverty strategy for the first time, but just need to be careful we're not just regurgitating something because we thought it looked good before. It's obviously it's clear we can't do nothing. We have to do this. We already have the system, so we've got to manage the framework. I am concerned about the delegated authority though, and how that means we scrutinise this project and the outcomes from it. And I'm not sure how we'll ensure that we'll have more than 17 providers available, and that spot purchases don't remain the norm. There's not really any detail about how we're going to do that. Maybe that will come out in the DPS itself. It's an ideal opportunity now to look at the ethical care charter. Every time we talk about care commissioning, I talk about the ethical care charter. Every time Stuart says, yeah, we'll definitely be looking at the ethical care charter, and I'd like to have seen that in the report maybe to help us along. And it's an ideal opportunity, I think, to match this with the fair cost of care exercise. I'm sure that is already being done, but I mentioned in a previous report that I was concerned that with the reform delays, then we might lose that work and the amount we spent on doing that work, which is considerable. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on how that is delayed and how the reforms are going to impact us being able to do it. And again, equality impact assessment feels really necessary here. I'd like to see one if it's done alongside the actual setting up of the new DPS, because if we delegate authority against Stuart and his team, we really need to see that that's been done. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Quite a few points there. Matt, did you want to come back on or abstention? Stuart, you should be first. Over to you.
So first up, in relation to our current CQC inspection kind of position, we're probably middle of the road in relation to the number of care settings that are good or outstanding. It's fair to say that the ratings of care provision as a whole has diminished over the last kind of 2 years. Some of the challenges we've had around workforce retention in these settings has really challenged some of those services. Equally, West Northampton is just finding its place in a different comparator group. Obviously, previously we were considered against county councils, and now we're considered against unitaries. If I come to the kind of procurement side of this, in the majority of authorities that I've worked in previously, the dynamic purchasing system that's in place works on an indefinite period for care homes. In effect, that if we've got a 70-bed care home that has met the council's contractual requirements, the notion of a contract ending and us not awarding the contract to that care home provider, in effect means that we would be moving 70 people from one setting to another. So the notion of having that indefinite nature to the DPS means that we can provide a level of continuity and certainty to care home residents, that we will be ensuring that care provision through the contract is managed and delivered at a quality level. So in effect, the notion of having that DPS in place will mean that if a new care provider came along tomorrow and built a home, that as long as they were able to meet the council's contractual requirements, then they would be able to join that direct purchasing system.
as part of where we are currently, the current fee rates, which have been in place for a considerable period of time, are well below the current numbers that we have around our fair cost of care money. So if you look at the spend that's attributed to care home provision, you'll see within the report it outlines that just around 2.3 million is attributable to the DPS, with 29 million attributed to spot purchasing. The reason that is the case is because the rates attributed to the DPS don't necessarily match the actual cost of care that we currently pay. So as the report alludes to, the expectation is that we will use the fair cost of care exercise in order to model fee rates, which more accurately depict what we currently pay for care. In that sense, that will mean that we will move to a position whereby we have significantly more providers on the DPS than we do currently, which means that we won't have to do the level of spot purchasing. It will mean that we have a more sustainable financial position in relation to the beds that we do buy for people. I do need to say that the guidance pertaining to fair cost of care is still in development. We are currently consulting with the market as per advice from DHSC on the original fair cost of care exercise that we took forward last year. Government have an expectation that we publish those fair cost of care rates through DHSC in February, and there are a whole host of implications for both providers and the councils attached to that process. From an equality impact assessment, we can send that through to you because any changes that we do make will be supported by it. The ethical care charter, particularly the point around the living wage elements of ethical care charter, is really difficult for us to play into in the context that was not necessarily having the full clarity around fair cost of care and the financial implications attached to that. But obviously it's something that we continue to consider as part of the approach. Matt,
Yeah, thank you. Never made a point about no end date. I think if we needed to have an end date on this paper, we would have done, and I think after a period of review, we can monitor how things have gone. If we need to change things or update it, we can bring another paper to cabinet. Based on the ethical care charter, I think there are some points in there that are very relevant. Stuart highlighted a couple of the issues, but ultimately, I think that if we're going to sign up to something like that, that needs to be a decision for cabinet. But other than that, I'm happy to support the paper chair.
Thank you.
Very briefly, just when we talk about CQC data and the average, how we compare to the national average, Ashley did an excellent report for scrutiny with regards to that. I just wanted to point that out, that perhaps we could pick that out and share that to all councils, because it was really excellent on where it's matched up to the rest of them.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael. Perhaps we can do that. Do we just put a link to it, an article and a link to it in this week's newsletter or something? It sounds like something that everybody will have a look at.
A little bit out of date, I would imagine now, it might be an update, but certainly have the data. So.
Yeah, it was put in out to all councils, something of that sort. Yeah.
And just one other point, sorry, the anti-poverty section does reference opportunities for care workers, how they can be supported.
Yeah.
On that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Any comments or questions on this slide at all? No? Okay, as always, recommendations of section 3 is actually your agreement to those recommendations. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Thanks for speaking to item 7. Now, which is in the prosperity fund. This is with down there, then 4 speakers: Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Hinch, Councillor Purser, and Councillor Holland Delamere. Over to you, Dan, for some initial comments.
Thank you, Chair. This is quite a simple one, really. There's 1.4 million just shy of funding for the Share Prosperity Fund. Our investment plan was submitted on the 30th of November. Excuse me. Two interventions we selected. One was communities in place, which is around capital grant funding for impact for volunteering and social action projects to develop social and human capital in local places. And the other one was supporting local businesses on a 40-60 split, 40 for communities in place and 60 for supporting local businesses The other one with the capital grant funding for small scale investment in micro and small enterprise in rural areas. The latter, the supporting local businesses, was going to be used for, or is going to be used for, providing businesses with capital grants to expand, diversify and innovate. The communities in place one, we're intending on using that to fund rural transport. There are probably 3 caveats, all of which are waiting for DEFRA on. They haven't confirmed the areas, they haven't confirmed whether we can spend it on rural transport, and they haven't confirmed if they've accepted our proposal or not yet. But we're relatively confident, but that's what we're going for. So everyone else is, I'm sure you all read the papers. I won't labour it anymore.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Let's hear from our speakers then, shall we? Councillor Humphreys first. Rosie, over to you.
Thank you for this report. I've got 2 comments and 1 question. Thank you. The main recommendations of the review attached to this report, detailed data analysis and consultation, were to address rural transport issues which have an impact on the community, the visitor economy, employers and more, as well as to fund grants for businesses. Based on this, there are some interventions included in the report. Going to the actual projects that have been selected, there doesn't seem to be a huge correlation between the rural transport issues identified and the projects selected. That said, I was delighted to see that the community hub in Crick, in my ward, is one of the projects that aligns with all the interventions identified in the report, and they are seeking refurbishment, better installation, and the use of to enhance the community hub and create a co-working space. I was at the hub it's the old school in Crick. I was there yesterday at the parish council meeting, and I have to say we were all wishing for better installation yesterday evening. But it's also used twice a week as a hub and succeeding in encouraging lonely residents to attend. Word is certainly getting out. One resident who came recently said that she'd not been out for years, but she visited the hub recently. Certainly an example of successful social and human capital. There are, of course, other suitable and deserving projects in other wards, but I think it's fair to say that the Crick community are dealing with an enormous challenge at present, supporting 175 asylum seekers located at the Raps Hotel at Junction 18. For example, they're offering English lessons, donating clothing and toiletries and family village shop on the Junction to welcome the residents of the islands. Some of the residents there are also coming to the community hub. It's a huge burden on the village's volunteers, and in recognition of what they're dealing with, I do hope their project for the old school will be looked on favourably in the first round of funding. I had a question about some interesting observations on Daventry in the review, which was that over the last 5 years, Daventry town saw improvements in happiness and life satisfaction levels, despite them falling nationally, and anxiety there increased at a slower pace. It's really striking. I'm sure there are lessons to be learned for other towns, and I'm sure that it's in a small way a reflection on the hard work of Daventry Town Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Our next speaker is Councillor Hinch. Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, I have no questions now as Councillor Lister has addressed them outside of the meeting for me. The only clarification is in the Hatch report. I was really surprised that Cannons Ashby is our most visited tourist attraction in the whole of West Northants. I don't believe that. I just believe the data we've got is probably not strong enough. And maybe it's something that officers can take up and understand what our tourist attractions actually are in the local area. Thank you.
Okay, just we'll come back to that. Next is Councillor Percival. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. We're not talking about huge sums of money here. It's quite a long report, but there are some significant needs in our rural areas. So this money won't go far, it must be used to pump prime and facilitate and enable other money to come in so that other needs can best be met. I'm a bit concerned that at the business bit of the paper, which I think is the green bit at the end, we've got a bit of a mishmash and wish list of projects, some of which are really look quite well thought out, and others are a bit, well, not very well detailed. So what we need is some very clear criteria as to which projects are going to be selected, so that this doesn't become a sort of slush fund for well-behaved councillors and their pet projects. So I want to be assured that there'll be a good well set of criteria against which the projects can be scored. So that's my question to councillors, that we have clear criteria to score these projects against.
Thank you, Bob. And then finally, Keith. Councillor Holland, welcome, Keith.
Thank you. Yes, welcome this report. Thank you, Mr. Councillor Lister, for highlighting the fact that rural transport is definitely been considered as part of this. The report definitely highlights the major challenges that rural communities face with public transport. We also really do need to consider the cycling infrastructure within our rural areas, and we do need to come up with an integrated multimodal transport plan for our whole entire community transport, bus routes, cycling, walking, and how we can connect our rural communities to the towns. At the moment, as you already know, and as we know from the bus strategy group, the challenges for rural public transport are immense at the moment, and we do need to be really considering how we invest some of this money in, as my colleague also said, about bringing in additional funds and imaginative thinking about how we're going to integrate our rural communities and our towns. Thank you.
Okay. Dan, back to you. Those comments you want to speak.
Yeah, a couple of points. Tourism, it's a good question. It's not Cannons actually. I've actually got a list. We've got quite a lot on tourism in terms of Northamptonshire, which is rather high, so not in west, but north, it's Wixley, but then next to Silverton, then Royal and Derngate and Stanley, then Althorpe. Just really interesting. So yeah, we do have very good data on that. We go very closely with those.
It's just page 94 of the report.
That's on the consultation. That's on the consultation. The few questions around this, things like projects that have been highlighted. They said that's purely on the consultation report. So it's not come from WNC.
That's consultation responses. It's not visit numbers. Is that what it's saying?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Plan, yeah, absolutely. We need a good plan. We will put a good plan in place to make sure that the bad councillors get some stuff as well. But absolutely, we need to make sure we're delivering everywhere. Transport strategy, I think Phil's working on one of those already and enjoying that transport strategy and completely agree. So hoping I disagree with them. Don't have anything else, but commend the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So it's page 94 itself. Okay, any further questions or comments at all? Phil?
Yeah, just welcome the rural transport aspect. We are currently working, as Dan says, on how we're going to deliver transport going forward, and we've got consultants currently working on that for us, and hopefully the report from that exercise will be coming forward in March, and obviously any spending will have to be related and aligned with the outcome of that report, which, as I say, hopefully will be coming forward in March.
Thank you, Phil. Any other comments at all or questions? This one. The Dan or colleagues to answer? No? Okay. In which case, as always, the recommendations are at section 3. Just ask you to confirm whether those are agreed. Are they agreed? Jonathan, thank you. This takes us on to item 11. This is admission arrangements for community involuntary control West Northampton schools for 24 intakes. This one is with Fiona, and after which we have just one speaker, Councillor Wendy Randall. So Fiona, over to you.
Thank you. We all know how important it is that the admission arrangements go smoothly. There is a cut-off date and they all come in, and if within a few days we're able to let people know which school they've been assigned out of their choices. We have successfully split the system into two, and we have run the primary school just recently, and it was very successful. So I'm really pleased that, having split the service in half, we have managed to get it running very successfully. So the council has a legal duty to determine its admissions arrangements for maintained schools by the 28th of February every year. Academies, free schools and voluntary aided schools determine their own admission arrangements. This report covers arrangements that apply to applications for September 2024. So there's not a lot to say about it really, but the report proposes that there are no changes from the current admissions arrangements, which we have proved in running them fairly recently, are working really well. Thank you.
Very good, thank you, Fiona. So one speaker here, Councillor Randall. Wendy, over to you.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I wondered if there's any provision for parents if they are poorly or need additional support from family members. So it may be that that child ends up spending more time with a member of family than their actual where they live. So I just wondered if, you know, how that will be taken into account, because I know some people that, you know, if they have frequent going to hospital and then they might have a grandparent, but that child doesn't actually, you know, their living address is not with that grandparent or member of family, but they might reside a lot of the time there. I just wondered if there's any provision of how that could be dealt with in any way. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Any comments on that? Yeah, is that reflected admissions?
I'm not. She's gone.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not quite clear on which provision that you're asking for. Are you asking for school provision or provision? So you need to change schools depending on where they are at the time.
No. I mean, if you live somewhere where, you know, like say you lived in a town and there may be, you know, 5 schools and you know, or somewhere needs to drive. It says in here about, you know, if parents are separated, and it'd be the home where the child resides most of the school week. But I just wondered if there was a parent that was quite poorly, could the child may not live with that, say, an auntie or an uncle, but it may spend a lot more time in that actual property. Could they put down that property rather than where they actually live? That's all.
The form, I think, says the child's primary address. So to my mind, that would mean the address that they spend most time in. So that probably covers that one.
Okay.
They spend more time with their grandparents than their or their old age.
Okay. That all covered. Any other queries or questions from cabinet members on this? No? Okay, thank you. In which case, again, recommendations of section 3, asking us to approve the admission arrangements as detailed in appendix A. Can I confirm that's agreed? Agreed? That's great, thank you very much. This takes us on to report from Adam, which is the governance framework for Northamptonshire Partnership Homes. 2 speakers on this after your comments, Adam, which is Councillor Finch and Roberts. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Some members will have received an early edition of the agenda for this meeting, which contains essentially an internal version of the report that was used for staff meetings. It included some appendices that were terms of reference that were yet to be completed, and some further briefing notes for staff that shouldn't have entered the public arena. So those are the second edition of the agenda pack. Won't have that. The report should be read as in that second edition. But essentially, this new governance framework represents both a vote of confidence in Northamptonshire Partnership Homes and something of a watershed moment in the transition of NPH from its historic status as the Almo for Northampton Borough to a social housing provider for a unitary authority which spans the entirety of our new district. With more stringent requirements being placed upon social housing landlords under the government's housing white paper, it is vital that WNC, as the landlord, has full oversight of its element operations in order to fulfil our statutory duties. NPH has historically performed strongly as the social housing provider for Northampton, but with ever increasing demand on our housing stock and the urgent needs to deliver more homes for more people at a faster pace than ever and maintain quality of service, we as the local authority have to ensure that the comprehensive governance framework is in place, and NPH acknowledge that requirement. Outside consultants were brought in to provide the necessary expertise and operational capacity to deliver this new framework, and their work, including research, consultation with relevant parties, and the final design of the new governance regime before us, lasted nearly a year. Members may notice some similarities between the forum structures that have been implemented and our own overview and scrutiny committee structure, but this is coincidence rather than by design, and the structure is intended to direct work streams to the appropriate officer teams both within WNC and their counterparts at MPH for joint discussions. The first meetings of the Place Forum, where we consider the pipeline projects and future works, have already taken place, with meetings of the other two forums scheduled for the months ahead. The paper proposed tonight is merely so that Cabinet can note the new arrangements and in order for the changes to benefit from greater member and public awareness. But as portfolio holder, I greatly welcome this. I think it will contribute to enhancing and strengthening the relationship that we have with Northampton Partnership Homes, and I look forward to strengthening the fruitful relationship in the years ahead.
That's great, Adam. Thank you very much. Nigel, you're indicating you don't want to speak anymore. You're happy not to. Okay, thank you very much. So just leave us one speaker, which is Councillor Roberts. Emma.
Thank you, Chair, and just expressing thanks to Jay and Karen for Councillor Brown for answering some of my questions before the meeting. Gosh, it's a complete waste of funds, a complete waste of money. We've spent nearly 115k on telling us we need governance and structure. We're a local authority. If we don't know we need governance and structure, then we've got a significant problem. We've done this because there was issues with the relationship with MPH, which is historical issues with the Borough Council. I was part of the board at the time, so I'm fully aware of those issues in my first year of this authority. But we've done it for that reason. We brought this report to Cabinet for a reason I'm not quite sure about. You opened the meeting, Chair, with how short of time we were and how we needed to hurry. This feels like it's on the agenda simply to tell MPH that we've created a structure and you will follow it. That doesn't suggest that relationship building has improved too much. There's no legal reason this report needs to be on the agenda. The report itself is presented, whether you look at the original version that was full of roles that don't exist and crosses because there was misinformation, or you look at the one that there's then on after an issue was raised about that report being disclosed, is poor. The report content is poor. I believe our officers would have done a much better job than this organisation has done. I'm happy with Councillor Brown explaining to me that we haven't and we did push back on any further commissioning for this organisation, but the report is poor. It doesn't provide us with anything new. There's no mention of social rents in the governance report. It's got unfinished areas. It doesn't demonstrate any real change or support from us, and that's why all the other additional parts that haven't been taken out weren't taken forward, I understand. There's reference in the terms and conditions that we're going to create chairs and secretaries of all of these forums, and they're going to be made up from directors, assistant directors and different officers. But there's no real detail on election processes or structures who's going to support those, and there's no detail at all as to how it's going to integrate with this Cabinet, this decision-making body, and the board of MPH, which is a decision-making body on its own and has to have the right to make those decisions freely and unhindered by this council. It's a complete waste of time, and I'm really worried that it actually demonstrates that we've got a desire to undermine the concept of the ALMO rather than a desire to improve it. I know you're going to tell me, Adam, that that's not correct, but that's how this reads to me. It doesn't work well at all.
Your comments. Yeah, the last one. So back to you, Ed.
Thank you, Chairman. I think actually I did answer a lot of the queries that councillor Roberts has just raised. I explained precisely why we brought the reports to this forum tonight. There's no question of that reason being to tell MPH that this is happening. They know, they were engaged throughout the process, and actually the work that was done by 4OC was invaluable in strengthening the relationship. We've always acknowledged that it was a difficult relationship to inherit. It's improved massively because of the work undertaken by 4OC and our officers throughout that year that they were doing that work. And as I've already outlined, we did need that additional operational capacity and the expertise that was brought in to come up with what I think is an important framework. And as I've already explained, we need the extra governance in place because of the context of the government's white paper, because of the duties upon us as a social housing landlords. And we would be remiss in our duties as a social housing landlord if we didn't have this oversight of the ALME. We still retain all of the obligations placed upon us as a landlord, as though we were still managing the stock ourselves. So whilst we respect MPH's sovereignty under the terms of the management agreement to undertake their duties as an ALME, it is absolutely vital that we maintain proper and rigorous oversight so that we can be reassured, not least, that the delivery of new housing will come forward, that tenants are being looked after, and that we are fulfilling our obligations to their tenants. So I think the work's been valuable. I think it's improved things, taken us forward. We're now in a place where we as a new authority can be confident that the relationship will work for both parties, and I believe that that feeling is shared by MPH.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Any further comments or questions on this one? No? Okay, let's look again at the recommendations on this are, as always, section 3. Note the contents of the MPH WNC governance framework and implementation plan. Just confirm your agreement to that, if you would, please. Great, thank you very much indeed. This is up to item 13, the report seeing Malcolm's name and Malcolm's absence. So Matt will be taking us through this, after which we've just got one speaker, which is council person. First of all, over to you, Matt, for your initial introductory comments.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I won't give too much detail here. The details in the report and the history, which is quite interesting, is also outlined in the report. Basically, we are looking to purchase the freehold of 6 houses in Brackley from a company called Paradigm Housing by taking on the freehold. Like I say, we actually own. So we own the freehold. We're buying out the leasehold on the 6 houses, and we're going to repurpose them for to make them fit for purpose for our current needs. And as Malcolm would say, this is a productivity gain. We're using capital money to use this. It will take money from our off of our revenue account moving forward, and we'll have assets that we can repurpose and use for adult social care moving forward, which seems a very sensible thing to do. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matt. Bob, welcome.
This is quite complicated. I just want to check that we're getting value for money in this, and because the prices seem relatively high to buy back something that is ours. So I suppose the question just has to be asked, is this value for money, or are we being ripped off? And then who will then manage it, and who's going to live in these houses, and who's going to manage and support them living in the house? Those are my questions. I'm looking for reassurance, I think.
Stuart, can you get that reassurance, Stuart?
Thanks, person. I can assure you it stacks up. When you look at the annual payment we currently make, if we don't take forward with this action, we'll continue to pay that with a level of inflation attached to it. As it currently stands, we want to remodel these homes to move them away from a care home setting to be supported living. Paradigm are not supportive of us taking that action. That means that we can move to a supported living model, which means, in effect, people get full access to their DWP benefits. It means the rental costs for the property will be covered through the housing benefit. So whilst the paper talks about the revenue savings from moving away from Paradigm, the ability to remodel the service
It gives us additional efficiencies through it. In relation to who will run the property, subject to get an agreement to take this forward, we would be looking to procure a suitable provider who has the ability from a housing perspective to attract enhanced housing benefit and provide individuals with a separate tenancy agreement to the support arrangements that we might have in place. That means that people don't necessarily lose their home if they fall out with their care provider because we have that separation. So I agree, Councillor First, it is a complicated piece of work, but this is a really positive move forward in relation to the people who live there and the potential future use of it.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody else any queries on this one at all? Comments to make? No? Good. Recommendations as always at section 3. Do we agree with the recommendations? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Item 14 is back with Adam. This is the active quarter. Adam, we've then got 3 speakers, Councillor Solomon, Roberts and Stowe. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. As with my last report, this is in fact not a paper that requires a decision by Cabinet. However, the creation of the active quarter is something that the Sports and Leisure team and I believe merits a degree of publicity and exposure at Cabinet, so I make no apology for that. The Council has been engaged with a number of key stakeholders in Northampton, namely Delaphy Abbey Preservation Trust, Northamptonshire Sport, and most significantly the University of Northampton, who have been the driving force behind the project. Just as with the cultural quarter, by creating a specific identity for part of the town, we are demonstrating our commitment to achieving a defined ambition and building upon the current successes in the vicinity. The investment by West Northamptonshire Council is modest, but it highlights the role of the local authority as a key stakeholder in this endeavour, and I look forward to further collaboration with partners to promote cycling, walking, running, water sports, and other activities in Northampton's new active quarter.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adam. All right, speakers. Councillor Humphreys, Rosie, over to you.
Thank you. This is an exciting and positive proposal and an area of miles of cycle routes and paths set within 158 hectares of green and blue urban space is to be very much welcomed and will obviously provide multiple benefits. But I just have one question really, which is how far is the social impact intended to reach? The active quarter will clearly be an asset for the local area partnership in to tackle health inequalities, but it doesn't seem in particularly easy reach of, say, residents living in Boothville and Parklands or Spinney Hills. So what measures will there be in place to enable all Northampton residents to access the zone? Thank you.
Jolly good. Thank you, Rosie. Our next speaker is Councillor Roberts. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. On this occasion, Councillor Brown, I think this report should be here, and I'm disappointed it wasn't here sooner. There's been no engagement whatsoever from this council with ward councillors, or certainly not me, and I'm a ward councillor heavily invested in this active quarter. On this project, I was aware of the project because I've been engaged by the university to get involved in their work on it, because I do a lot of work with the university. So I've been part of a consultation programme on the survey that's mentioned and the survey that's going to go out to residents. I've been part of building that, as well as the survey itself and the video, which I'm very grateful for. But we've not had any engagement, so I'm excited to see this here. The active quarter is really exciting. The problems that I see from my perspective is when I've talked to the different counterparts, the different organisations involved, I'm not sure the vision yet is clear for what it needs to be. So I'm really hopeful we start to see a clear vision arise. Now we're starting to survey residents about what they would like to see. The UN participation, by the way, I think has been phenomenal. I think they've done a really good job in how they've engaged with people. There doesn't seem to be any governance structure around these parties, and I know it's a fairly modest financial investment that we're putting in, but if we haven't got a clear vision and they don't really have a structure, then I'm not, any investment is risky. There's lots of sort of talk about the active quarter being about active travel and about cycle routes, etc., and that's really exciting, as well as just opening up the open spaces that we've got for those who wouldn't normally have access to it. But the problem I have is that a recent query in an area that will form right in the heart of the active travel quarter with regards to a cycle route. And unfortunately, we don't own the cycle route. So we own, I don't know the measurement, but we own this chunk of the cycle route. A private landlord owns this chunk of the cycle route. And this bit in the middle is unadopted and unregistered. So, and when I've queried about maintenance of these cycle route areas, our highways team is telling me it's not their responsibility, it's got nothing to do with them. So I'm really concerned about the cycling infrastructure that we've got within the active quarter if we aren't in control of that, or we can't at the very least get control of it. So really excited to do this, but I think those gaps need to be plugged, and I think they need to be plugged sooner rather than later, because otherwise we're going to get right down the line with this project. We're going to advertise it as a lovely space and then not going to actually deliver what we want it to. But I'm trying to, it's really positive about it, but it's just not got a vision yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Following Councillor Stone, Danielle.
Just very quickly, Chair, this is lovely and absolutely what we need. And of course, Councillor Lara will remember this has got a very long history. We were talking about this in the good old days of County Council in about 2014, I think it was. So I'm really glad it's finally coming to fruition. I do think there's always an issue about who owns it, you know, who's going to use it, who's not going to be using it. So I do think extra care needs to be taken about getting into schools, for example, and making sure all the young people know, because it's, as we know, people power is really, you know, really good, and they will be the ones who get their parents out and their families out from across Northampton. And the same goes with black groups, actually. So I'm thinking about groups like Pearls of Peace. It would be really, really good if we targeted groups to involve them and doing introductory walks or cycle events with them, so they really do feel ownership, and we don't just leave it to chance. And again, after the project has been bedded in, I would like to see any positive impact assessment so that we know we're getting to the people we really want to get to. Thanks.
Sure, good. Thank you. A few points there. Adam, you want to respond on some of this? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Humphreys, thank you for the positive reception in terms of how far the social impact will reach. Well, the active quarter is where it is. In terms of connectivity to the north of Northampton, there are good bus routes, and within the active quarter itself, there's ample parking. But of course, we'll do our best to monitor who's using that particular facilities as and when we're up and running. Yeah, I take the learning point from Councillor Roberts about engagement with ward councillors, and we'll try to do better on that in the future. The vision will be an ongoing work. On this occasion, I don't think we need to go as far as a formal governance structure. We work very, very well indeed with the University of Northampton and with Northamptonshire Sports. And that, taking on to Councillor Stone's point, I think it may be worth you, Councillor Stone, coming on to a meeting with Northamptonshire Sports and hearing just how much they do to try and increase participation in sport with harder to reach groups. Chris Holmeson's team do a huge amount to reach women, girls, ethnic minority groups, and other people who wouldn't necessarily have the degree of sporting participation we might hope. So we'll continue to work with them. And I'd love to take you along to a meeting with Chris Holmes to try and reassure you that that work is being done, and that we as a council are supporting fully in that. I think that, sorry, Councillor Roberts mentioned the joining up of cycle routes. Again, we're working with the University of Northampton on joining the dots, if you like, in the cycle network. We recognise that the cycle network as it isn't joined up, it's inadequate. And so a mapping exercise has been done by academics at the University of Northampton to see where and how we can improve upon that. The active quarter will be a key part of that, but their work actually extends to the whole of the cycling network across the town and out towards the perimeters of Northampton into villages such as those I represent, like Harpole and Kissenboo. So we'll continue to work with them on that, and I'll be happy to keep you updated.
Thanks, Ellen. Bill, are you going to make a comment?
Thank you, Joe. I totally support this. I think it's fantastic opportunity, fantastic idea. I hear what Councillor Roberts says about active travel routes, but I'm sure we'll manage to sort those out. But can I just put my ward councillor hat on for a moment? Because there's a great asset that doesn't appear to be included within the vision. You've got Bracknells, but you haven't got Bracknells Woods. Or am I wrong in that? Is Bracknells Woods included within Bracknells? Or because I think Bracknells Woods is a good opportunity. It's a developing facility. It's fairly new in terms of open space within that area of Northampton, as you know, Chair. And I just wondered why it hadn't necessarily been included. But yeah, sorry to bring that up, but just thought about it.
No, it's a good point, Phil. I think that's just to say noted. Is that right, David? Yeah. Oh, please go around the Bracknells. I beg your pardon. Yeah. Yeah. And this is an evolving thing, isn't it? A bit like Councillor Roberts said, I've heard about this for some time, had conversations with the university. What we're doing tonight is because we're on board with this, it's a fairly modest initial financial thing. So all the informal conversations and so on, we can have in on governance, cycle path ownership and all those various things, because we're properly on board. I think the big thing for this is to recognise that a lot of partners are working with it, with the local authority adds a certain weight, and for them to progress certain plans, they need to know they've got the local authority on side. That's what we're telling them tonight, I think, Adam, is that. Yeah, brilliant. Any further comments on this? No, in which case, recommendations at section 3, as always, can you discuss, you confirm your agreement to the recommendations? Agreed? Thank you very much. Okay, item 15, private finance initiative, motorcycle works. In Malcolm's absence, I've got a couple of comments I'll just make to issue this. There were 2 speakers, Councillor Hinch and Councillor Purser. So this report seeks to resolve some legacy issues in the past in connection with NCC. WNC inherited a long-term private finance initiative contract, which covers 42 schools, and that contract runs up until the 1st of January 2038, so has some time to run. The replacement and repair of certain building elements in some of the schools were taken out of the PFI contract by NCC in short cost-saving exercise. But these items are now in critical need of replacement in order to ensure that schools are safe, legal, and fully functional. The added benefit of the proposal is that the items, once they are in good order, will return to being the responsibility of the PFI contractor. So it's therefore proposed a capital budget of 1.1 million should be recommended to council to bring these issues up to standard, to make them safe and legal, and to then hand them back to the responsibility of the PFI contractor. That's largely what this report is about. At that point, we'll take our 2 speakers, which is first from Councillor Hinch. Nigel, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. As a ward councillor for one of the schools that is listed in this report, I think this is long overdue. That for 6 years they've had to suffer with poor lighting in the classrooms, and all I can do is to say, can we get on with this as quickly as possible, please?
Thank you. Thank you for your experience and so on. Sounds very positive that we're doing this. Oh, over to you.
Yes, Chair, this is a bit of a nasty that's come out of the woodwork, it looks like. And whatever we think of PFI, and I think there have been some positives, but there have also been some negatives. And I think actually, as a state, we were ripped off by the finance industry to quite a large extent. And I can understand why the temptation to cut maintenance costs was made. And I would hope that we get on with this and do this, because some of these schools have been waiting for all these repairs for some considerable point of time. I suppose the question that has to be asked is how many more PFI related cuts were made, and have we any other things like this to come out of the woodwork? That's my question.
Thank you. It's a really good question. Comments quite similar to Councillor Hinch's, and always let's get on with this and get it sorted. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's lessons learned around private finance initiatives, isn't there? Not all positive necessarily, but this is an essential thing to be done. I don't know if anybody's able to answer that question about were any other reductions made in any other private financial initiatives. Does anybody know the answer to that, Andy? No, or perhaps Martin, are you able to comment? So perhaps that's something we should look at and get back to. Sorry, Stuart.
You're right, I don't have the specific answer to that. I know in terms of the contracts that we're looking at here, these were the elements that were withdrawn for the cost-saving reasons. So in terms of the school PFIs that we're looking at today, these are the only, I can call them skeletons that we've unearthed on this one. So confidence on this contract, but no information as to other PFIs that may be in operation at this time.
Thank you, Stuart. Fiona, you want to make comments?
Just to sort of enhance what others have said, really, that I'm aware of all of these schools that are fallen under this particular problem. And they have been struggling for some time, so would be very keen for us to get on with this work as soon as possible. It is a subject that comes up regularly at our school forum meeting that we have. So it would be good to be able to go back with the positive attitude on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan,
Sorry, that's only going to declare an interest, so I should have done at the beginning. I'm the governor of one of these schools. Sorry, thank you.
thank you, Dan. We can record that. Thank you very much. Any further comments on this at all? No? Okay. If I may then on this item, I should ask you to confirm the recommendations, which as always are in section 3. Are they agreed? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, this takes us on to item 16, which is asset disposal. Again, in Malcolm's absence, I'll make a couple of comments about these. Obviously, we have an ongoing programme of rationalising assets, which we've seen some evidence of certainly during the last few months. The service needs change. There is a need to modify, buy or dispose of the buildings and lands that the council owns. 6 assets covered by this report. Probably some points that are worth highlighting. I'm going, if I may, to come back to Albion House, which is first on the list, but brief comments about the others. Ribble Close, this has now actually been identified really as suitable for housing purposes, and as such we might change the recommendation, which will be that as well as considering freehold disposal, it could be transferred to the housing revenue account. With our shortage of homes and our campaign to build homes, it seems ridiculous to think of having 2 homes that we sell separately. Ecton Brook, this is also a site where potential council housing could be delivered, and so there's for many of these no final proposal. It is just that we're asking them to be looked at carefully to get the best possible use, which may be disposal. The option of a market sale is retained in case a housing scheme, for example, is not viable. The Evelyn Wright property, this site is no longer required or suitable, so a market disposal seems sensible to reduce costs and generate income. There's a potential for a scheme working with a people service partner, but this would be at a market value if it proceeded. Just at the moment, for its current purpose, Evelyn Wright does not conform to the standards we would expect for this type of accommodation. Walker House, this has been held by WNC since it was inherited from Northamptonshire County Council. It was originally used by the fire service, before that transferred to the commissioner. No service has been identified, and thus it makes sense to seek a commercial occupier, ideally to cover the remaining period of the lease. And then the former Brackley swimming pool site. Obviously, since the leisure centre, this is no longer required, but it is a highly valuable site. It has potential, for example, for housing. However, we are very keen to work further with Brackley Town Council because they have significant ambitions for the land, which we believe has high level of social value. At the moment, that is the proposal. But coming back to Albion House, it is largely empty. Has 1 tenant occupying 1 small part of it. And as such, it's very likely that we move forward for disposal. I have personally 2 concerns, so I'm going to suggest that for the time being we take this off. We had considered, first of all, I'm not totally sure we've explored all possible council or partner uses. And secondly, I think where it's located, it's got a really, really important role in place shaping as a gateway site coming into the town. And I say that on the day that myself, Councillor Lister, Stuart and others visited Leicester to see some of the regeneration that's gone on there, and possibly that's raised our aims and our game as well. So I think for the time being, we'd like to remove that one. It may come back for disposal, but at the moment we've just got a little further thinking to do. So my suggestion would be that we remove that first one from the recommendations, and that also under the recommendation, which is currently B, I guess will become A, the formal Ribble Close group home, Northampton, freehold or transfer to HRA would be a change there to the recommendation. I hope that makes some sense. I think we've got a couple of speakers. Yes, we have. In this order, Councillor Stone, Councillor Randall, and Councillor Holland down there. So Danielle, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased with your recommendations as they stand at the minute. I think it's really, really important that we look at not just asset disposal, but about how we benefit and how our communities benefit. And of course, we've got a desperately awful housing crisis. So anything that we can do to repurpose land or repurpose buildings for housing, I think is laudable, and we really need to do that. I'm also really pleased that you're considering working in partnership with Brackley Town Council to make really good use of that site for their residents. I think that's, again, really good practice. The thing that I am concerned about is we haven't yet, and the question is, will we, do a scoping exercise so that we really fully understand what our communities need and what they would want us to help them do to help meet some of those needs. So I'm a bit nervous about the idea of asset disposal before we have properly scoped what community needs. And I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about. I took a lot of groups around Albion House to have a look at it. It's galling for all our communities to see it on such a prime site, facing the park near the university, empty. So I took the Africa Centre, I took the supplementary schools, I took Ghana Amalgamation, I took the Youth Centre Youth Summit campaign, and we were there, me and Jamal were there from Northampton Town Sanctuary. Before we did that, we'd already talked to the university, to Goodwill Solutions, to Rotary and to the lottery about whether they would support all of us, this collective, in repurposing that building for community needs, and we had plans drawn up for that. Because we couldn't put money on the table straight away, we were ignored. I felt we were ignored and not taken seriously, although we had done a huge amount of work. My learning from that is community groups like the ones I've just mentioned do not have the capacity, and as expected, we did not have the capacity to do a full business plan. But we have garnered a huge amount of partnerships that were willing to help us. Now, I'm not saying that we should have been given the building. What I'm saying is there's work to be done, it seems to be my learning from that. And I'm happy to do some of that learning. There's work to be done in terms of how we understand what the community need is and how the local authority can support some of those ideas to come to fruition in whatever way.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Councillor Randall. Wendy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo previous speakers, but tonight I'm speaking about the home in Daventry that was gifted to the people of Daventry by Evelyn Wright to be used for the purpose of elderly care, which it did for many, many years until it was recently closed about 4 years ago because it wasn't fit for purpose. But during that time, we have lost 2 care homes and our rehabilitation units. I think we've hardly got anything left now. So if anybody has a stroke and needs to come home, they're often sent over to the north of the county. So I know that, you know, we're told there isn't a need, but the local people wouldn't agree with you, which is another reason why we own, you know, that land, we own that property. We are going to need to invest in something in the future. And, you know, looking at bringing care back in-house, which would in the long run be better for this authority, I believe. And I just don't feel that we should be rushing in to dispose of something before we've looked at all the options. Don't know what our future plans are. I don't know whether this site would be sold off to a private developer. I don't know whether if it was building social homes. I don't know what it would, you know, what it would be sold off for. We seem to be losing so much within Daventry town, and what the people have asked me is, if you do dispose of that, will that money be retained for the use of Daventry people as it was gifted, or will it just go into a big pot and not benefit anybody within the town? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We're actually two more speakers. Councillor Holder and Mayor Keith is next.
It's excellent book. Councillors Clark, Hill and myself, the ward councillors for Benning Farm, which covers excellent book, have really heard our community and their need for a community pub, community facility. And we really do urge that as part of any plans, the consideration is given to a community hub as part of any development on this site. Our community, the Exeter community, is crying out for accessible community facilities where they can gather, and we can provide other services from the council to the Epsom Brook community. So just urge consideration as part of any plans, including the housing revenue account, that we look at those options. It's crucial for that community.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Steve. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Jonathan. On the proposal for the Brackley pool site, the report doesn't appear then to take any point from 526 to 31, I think it is. It doesn't mention that this council, or what was South Northants, owns a significant chunk of land adjoining the pool site, the old Brackley pool site. And it always occurred to me when I was here that and the county owned, so the county owned the old pool site, and it was leased to South Northants Council as the report sets out. But the redevelopment of that site, it always appeared to me that one of us held the key and the other held the lock when it was the county and South Northants. But neither the key holder nor the lock holder were ever prepared to sit and do what was needed to unlock the potential of a site assembly, both that site and the one behind it, and possibly the school site as you identified, and possibly other sites as well if you actually look at the map. So are we quite sure that strategically we're not going to regret taking out one chunk of this? And I'm not against working for Brackley Town Council or anybody else, but I'm just worried that you may, without a full strategic oversight of all of the land that's there and could potentially be assembled to be there, that you're actually not making a decision that in the long term you might regret.
Thank you for raising that. With a number of points to sort of pick up on there, haven't we? Exton Brook have had lots of representation in terms of the need for community facilities. Something we have to undertake, that we need to review exactly what we've got in Exton Brook. That would be a part of this process, I think. But that last point on the ownerships, obviously picking up this report, I'm not quite so sure I'm completely okay with the ownerships. You're able to comment on that, Stuart. Should I hand over to you to sweep up perhaps a couple of these things? Thank you.
And thank you for all of the comments received there. There are a number of comments there about the needs of communities and referencing use of buildings, referencing community hubs for the development of services and access to services, etc. In that respect, I think that's exactly the role of the local area partnerships as we go forward, is to actually look at each of those neighbourhoods, understand the full requirements of that, and access to service as part of that requirement. So that is certainly being looked at. So every neighbourhood will have an assessment of the need and that understanding. The other part of the office is to bring community, the business and councils together to understand those wider needs and understanding as well. And so therefore, that's where we will get many of the considerations and understanding of actual need and evidence need of our communities as we go forward. And then as a council, this supposed to be able to respond to that as we go forward. Lots of talk about care homes. Again, that's working alongside stewards services in understanding the provision for care. The role of assets is to make sure that we can deliver on those strategies, meeting the needs of residents as we go forward. So rather than answer which communities need that, because that's not my role is to facilitate the strategy as such, then that's exactly what we are doing, supporting the role of adults and people's services in making sure that we deliver on the outcomes that is evidence-based and required in those particular areas. In terms of the Brackley, we don't look at it in terms of whether it's owned by county council or South Northants. It's owned by the council, so I can assure Councillor McCord that we've looked at the totality of the land in this particular area in putting this suggestion forward. We have looked at planning and the opportunity of planning. Whilst there is some opportunity for housing, it is a town centre site. There are obvious constraints with the road and the access into the site, which, whilst it is a large site, it is one that is constrained by other issues such as access, which actually tempers the value of that going forward. And that's why I think we can go into some certainty to that discussion with Brackley, knowing that the outcomes that they're wanting to deliver and the social impacts that they want to deliver against the values that we actually have on that land. And that is a decision that will be made as we go forward, which will be obviously open to scrutiny as well. So hopefully, Chair, I've answered most of the points raised there.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. And so picking this up from cover Malcolm, I'm not so familiar. And I just wonder if perhaps there's a wider ownership, as you might say, the SNC, lease elements, or the county ownership is no longer the issue. Everything is owned by West Northants, of course. But is the part that's up for consideration, the old pool site, is in any way access to the wider site areas with that? It's not.
No, we are looking at the full extent of the site in terms of the negotiation.
Yeah.
So there will be no ransom potential or issues like that. And again, with any assets, whether it would be with the town council or whether with the developer, we put certain elements into the contract to protect the council as we go forward. So making sure that there is overage or anything in that nature should the town council decide to sell it on in the future. So all of those protections will be in place as we go forward. But again, happy to sit down with any member and talk through the details of these things.
Thank you, Stuart. Reference the evening rights in Daventry. I mean, clearly, the process of it, it's very outdated. It's not of the building itself in its current state, it's not of the quality you would want people to live it. It's just not on. I think you're talking about some where there's now ensuite bathrooms, that sort of thing. So it's completely inappropriate. Nevertheless, the science and alternative use, alternative provision, council's own provision, which I know is a factor in terms of things that we're looking at, not just providers, but our own provision. Is there anything in that we should be considering or that will be considered as part of this matter? Stuart, I don't know if either of you are able to chip in on that. In fact,
yeah, as far as I'm concerned,
as well.
I think Evening Right and the Epsom Book site, we can understand their role within the communities, but we've got to make sure we're commissioning or putting a provision in there that's fit for purpose and up to date with regulation. It was deemed that both of those didn't meet the needs quite some time ago, hence they're being closed. And I think any benefit from assets moving forward can help form our strategy, like Stuart was referencing, like how we move forward and commission and build whatever we need to meet purpose, meet the need for our residents that's fit for purpose and got longevity lifespan. So I can understand the points Keith and Wendy raised there, but certainly we've got to view this in the context of meeting the needs for now and the future.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything, Stuart? Was that Anna, does that go? Yeah, please.
Thank you. It's just worth saying because I was actually the DAS at the time in the county council when we closed the evening right. It had very specific issues in terms of usage, but the other problem we had is it's incredibly difficult to recruit staff there. And we actually went through a whole process before we decided to close it, seeing if another provider would take it on. And we were in active conversation with them about them potentially doing a rebuild of the site, but it just wasn't viable for them, and they also struggled with the staffing issues. We did look into the covenant at the time. The covenant is about benefit of the community, not specifically elderly care in the community. And so obviously the key therefore as part of any land negotiation we do, whatever is put there has some benefits to the community to be part of that discussion. But I just wanted to say, I mean, it has been closed a very long time, and I've been there for years now, 4 years plus. But there were several considerations at the time, and we did try to find another provider, but it wasn't successful in the end.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Okay, sorry, Adam, beg your pardon.
Yeah, so thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just on Ripple Close, it is important that we do continue to take account of the needs, not just of future social housing, but actually the need that officers within the housing group have identified, which is general needs temporary accommodation. So it may be that subject to some feasibility studies, we're able to keep this property within the general fund, be used as temporary accommodation, but they may also transfer over to the HLA for additional social housing. So we'll work on both possibilities. Just on Epton Brook, NPH have got quite advanced plans for the redevelopment of the Epton Brook care home. Pleasure to see Councillor Paul Clark here tonight. He's been very vocal along with Councillor James. So, of course, Councillor Hollindale and calling for a new community hub in Epton Brook. We've had meetings with the communities team to look for alternative sites. After it seemed that feasibility studies had shown that an incorporated community hub wasn't possible within a care home. But I did receive advice from NPH very late last week, which I haven't had a chance to communicate to board members yet, which suggests that there may be an adjacent parcel of the land already in the HRA, which may be able to provide for that community hub. So at the earliest possible opportunity, I'll set up a meeting with 3 ward councillors. I believe there's also interest from Andrew MP, and hopefully we'll be able to take that forward, subject to all the usual caveats around affordability and funding. But the land appears may well be available.
That's really helpful. Okay, so I think where we are, and the last few agreements are the recommendations, and I think those recommendations have changed slightly. Just going to add, if I may, to the delegation. First of all, recommended that I recommend the Assistant Director of Assets and Environment, if it's in conjunction with the cabinet member. And then 3.11 to agree terms for the disposal of the following assets and enter the documentation required to implement this. I think for the time being we're removing A, so B becomes A. In other words, we'll take out the NAS out from yeah. And then the recommendation A is former Ribble Close Group Home, Northampton, bracket freehold or transfer to HRA. So after the word freehold, still within the brackets, freehold or transfer to HRA. So we feel that reflects the discussion we've had. You guys are happy with the wording? Yeah, okay, great. So based on those revised recommendations, if already can I actually confirm your approval to those recommendations? Is that agreed? Lovely. Thank you very much. Takes us on to item 7, parking charge arrangements at parks. This one's with Bill. So a few words of introduction from you, following which we speakers. Oh, actually a couple of public speakers as well, Mr. Rowan Smith and Mr. Mark Hicks. We've then got Councillor Kevin Parker, Councillor Rosie Humphreys, Councillor Wendy Randall, Councillor Russell, Howell Harvey, and Councillor Stowe. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Several aspects to this report. First of all, we inherited as West Northamptonshire Council a significant difference in charging between Daventry Country Park and Brixworth Country Park. So we did last year consolidate the season ticket prices, but this year we are now proposing table 2 in the report. We're proposing consolidated charges for both Brixworth and for Daventry Country Parks. We're also bringing forward the issue of the racecourse car park, because we have a big problem with a car park not being used for its proper purpose. We know that there are many commuters who drive into Northampton, park there all day and walk into business or work somewhere, and therefore that prevents the car park being used for its proper purpose. I've worked with the wardens on this, and that's what we've confirmed, and therefore we decided to impose a charge on the racecourse car park. The charging scale for that car park is in line with other car parks within Northampton, as opposed to the other country parks, and those charges are at table 3 in the report. And can I just say that in line with the policy of all car parks in Northampton, blue badge holders will be free. So that's where we are with the racecourse. But in respect of all these 3 car parks, we intend to introduce a streamlined and simplified system, making it much easier for customers to use by using an ANPR system for people to register a system that works on ANPR. And going forward, we're currently introducing it in the main car parks in Northampton. I think the St John's is more or less gone completely live now, and the one up on Abington Square, St Michael's, that's currently being converted. So there's others as well to go, but these car parks, all 3 car parks, will operate on a similar basis, which, as I say, is a far simpler, streamlined system for customers, giving them easier access. No need to use machines necessarily, because there will be an app where you can register your car and you can just come in and out as you please, and you will be charged automatically on your registration number. So, as I say, much simpler system. There has been issues where we've been asked to consider a reduced charge for people attending the fun runs at these 3 country parks, which I believe is on Saturday morning. And we're therefore proposing at all sites a season ticket of park run season ticket of £5, which will enable those attending the fun runs to park by paying just £5 a year. It does say in the report at paragraph 5.9 that the park run season ticket would apply to a specific park. It won't, and I will propose a change to the recommendations in that one season ticket will be valid for all 3 parks. If somebody regularly runs at Daventry and decides they want to go to Brixworth, well, why shouldn't they? So that will be going forward. We also understand there may be issues about the junior fun run. So again, I'll be proposing an amended recommendation saying that we will review the scheme after 6 months, during which time we will look at the issue of junior fund runs as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. And just to correct that, it's park run, I think, rather than fund run. And the reason why I say that is specifically it's a part of a formal park run operation. It doesn't matter whether it's senior, junior, any other sort of thing. If it's formally park run within those hours, I think that's what we're proposing. Is that? No,
Not necessarily.
There may be other sections within the comments.
Not necessarily. That's why we want to be able to have a look at that over the coming 6 months, and then have the review.
Yeah, right. Thank you for the comment on that. Shall I take the speakers and use them?
Junior part road and the main part.
Yeah, let's get that's the way it should be. Come to our speakers first.
So we'll look for the most simplified process.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Cool. Thanks very much indeed. Right. Let's on two public speakers first. Mr. Rowan Smith. So, welcome, Mr. Smith. You just there's a button in the middle there. Press that, and the light will go red, and that means you're in business. Get this need, so it should carry that great. Thank you.
I'm reading for my son who lives on Hood Street in central Northampton. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak to you this evening. Life on the Mount isn't the best in West Northampton for many reasons you all know, but one constant irritation is the parking arrangements. Hood Street, Colwyn Road, Cowper Street are all Victorian terraces. The small frontage of each house means that there is just about space for one vehicle per house. But flats, HMO conversions, coupled with occasional two-car families and work vehicles, mean there will never be enough on-street parking to satisfy resident demand. Unlike some areas of the Mounts, there is also no resident parking arrangement, so long-term parking of non-resident vehicles already adds a problem. Parking near your house on the Mounts is a challenge, especially at night. You may be lucky and get a space outside your front door, but the chances are you'll have to park some distance from your house and walk back. Not the end of the world, you might think. But it's different when you consider the local crime rate. In November last year, the most recent figures available were 49 crimes committed within 250 metres of Hood Street in 1 month, including 22 incidents of violent crime. That's not far off one violent crime every day. This week, police are appealing for witnesses to a serious assault on Shakespeare Road, the access road to Hood Street, where I live. In this environment, a lone single person, male or female, walking back from his or her car on their own, especially late at night, is running a risk. Nobody chooses the longest walk and parks overnight in the racecourse car park unless they have to. It's when there's no other choice. It's the last resort. Many nights you can see shady individuals through the bushes, hovering around with their mobile phones lit up as they routinely peer inside each parked car to see if anyone has left anything abandoned. I won't label these people, but if these guys walk towards you at night, they aren't generally wanting to know the time. What I'm trying to portray here is that life on the Mounts has its challenges, and just living a quiet, normal day-to-day life requires some personal grit. The density of people, the social problems, and the general environment that prevails in the streets leaves much to be desired. We pay our council taxes just like everyone else, but papers such as this make me think we're invisible. I do wonder just how much more the council wishes to alienate itself and how much more pressure and bad feeling they wish to precipitate on the local residents through not fully considering the impact of their proposals. I have 3 key points I'd like the council to consider. Firstly, in summary, the paper before you said the racecourse is being used as a free car park for people walking into town and charging should be introduced to assist council finances. The very fact they're walking from the racecourse into town says these motorists are likely to be parking all day, or it wouldn't be worth the effort. So what is stopping these very same motorists scouring the adjacent unrestricted free parking areas on the Mounts and making the residents' already poor situation worse? Parking on the Mounts is free and closer to town than the racecourse. The proposal before you doesn't consider this anywhere. Other local residents so low on the social scale that their interests and the environment in which they live doesn't matter. Secondly, the table paper doesn't mention the use of the racecourse car park as a nighttime overflow for local residents. What's the survey conducted? What was the nighttime use and by whom? Motorists certainly don't leave their car and walk into town from the racecourse late at night. Any comprehensive survey of use would reveal its limited, though vital function as a resident's overflow, even if for those who use it, it is undesirable and an essential last resort. I'd like to request that if the council does approve this proposal, it recognises the local residents' plight and introduces nighttime only resident parking permits for those living on the Mounts in the immediate vicinity of the racecourse car park. Thirdly,
If the paper is passed as tabled, I request that the council make an immediate study into expanding the current residence parking schemes to cover all the current areas of free street parking between the racecourse and the town centre. It's only fair. Residents, some of the poorest in the country, will be the ones paying to park on the racecourse when they come home from work in the afternoon or can't find a space on their own street at night. The council has a moral duty to ensure it doesn't find itself with a substantial part of this car park revenue being derived from some of its residents least able to pay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sorry, Mr. The second speaker, Mark, yes, welcome.
Thank you for that, by the way. Well, I've been really angry about this, but I'm going to try and keep a lid on it.
Yeah, just press the button on your microphone, Mark, if you want.
Can you speak close to the microphone?
I'll speak close to the mic. I think you can hear me. Can you hear me, Phil?
You've got.
You can hear me. I think you can hear me.
All of it's Mark, but we're not being awkward, but there are people coming on YouTube who can't, and I can tell you.
I haven't heard anything tonight, so.
Oh, okay.
Right, we've been talking a lot about mental health today, like the green space, the rural, all of this stuff, yeah, and safeguarding youth coming through, making sure they're safe, making sure that they've got mental health and it's all in check. I can tell you, I've had my ups and downs with mental health. I've seen it from the inside out. I've found myself through it. And do you know what? Do you know what? What's been the biggest help? Green space. Yeah. Now we've been talking over email, Mr. Larratt, but you haven't been replying to us since Christmas on a completely different matter, actually. But it's quite ironic because it's what you did, what's happened at Holston Firs has hit me so hard because that's where I've gone. When I've struggled, I've gone there. And what you've done there has activated me and it's made me interested in what's going on in my town. And then, so I've lived in this town most of my life. I moved to London for a while, and I used to play football at the racecourse every Saturday and Sunday. Used to go there. I work next to the racecourse actually, so I walk through the racecourse. It's full all the time. Basketball courts, people just doing stuff, evening clubs. Now, when we've been talking about mental health, why is there this obsession with this council to like continue to monetize parking? Like, I don't get it. I've had a shop in the town. I had this conversation with McIntosh, your previous guy, and I had this, I can't remember, it was Tim Hadlin maybe. And they were like saying, yeah, well, people need to pay parking. No, they don't. It's what's driven everyone out of town. And now you're doing it. And like, I live outside of town now, actually. I'm fortunate enough to live near some really beautiful green space. And it's the Holston Firs thing that's got me. It's like, you are literally saying, you're systematically destroying the town centre. And you won't think that, but locals will. And now you're doing it to the countryside and now green space as well. So the first question I posed, that I didn't expect to get like this, but the first question, why do you feel the need to like continually monetize things that are free around parks? It's green space. Like why? If you want mental health, why do you have to keep monetizing it? If you want good mental health, let people go there without anxiety that a number plate recognition system where they might get fined when they leave. Yeah, because that's happened to my wife, it's happened to me before. It's horrible. It induces anxiety, if anything. But there's no benefits there. What I kind of wanted to know was like, whose interest is it in the parking? Is it in the locals' best interest or is it in the council's best interest? I would love to know, like, genuinely, could you list today, anyone, what the benefits for the locals are for this parking? I'd be really interested to know that. And the one that you have brought up in the paper is obviously about how so people use the park for the right reasons. Could someone please tell me where the research and consultation, but is it just off the back of what you've thought? I mean, I don't know, because I have no idea. I don't know anyone that would park there, like the gentleman to behind, that would park there and then go into town. I just don't get it. It's bizarre, and it's, to be honest, I could go through a few other things there, but about 3 or 4 times you've said about the council's financial position and the need to get more money. What, by double taxing like the locals of Northampton? It's got to a point now where you're literally pushing people that hard and you're doing that to them. And I'm sitting for that reason, because I'm fed up with it. And I don't even live in town anymore. But it's just, you've ruined the town centre for what it was. Football has gone through the floor. And I just want to know the benefits and the thought process, and just to know that it's not purely financial. Now, the park run or fun run, which is park run is actually a nationwide thing actually. So maybe we need to do a bit of research on that before we just dismiss it as a fun run. The season's got after that being looked at. But what about the footballers that go there Saturday and Sundays? What about the basketball people that go and use the court? What about people that use the stuff in the evenings, like when it's light evenings? And let me know. And like I said, it's not the nicest one. I didn't know there was an overflow problem, but I used to live on Wood Street as well, and I do know that the parking's running. So, like, what I used to turn, you're going to get people turning up not knowing they have to pay there, and they're just going to get taxed, and they're just going to stop parking there. So you're going to take an asset, and you're going to monetize it, and you're going to actually take away the use that you're trying to make. It makes zero sense. It's kind of back to front and then upside down, and it makes zero sense. It's money. And I think that's really about 4 times in here, the council's financial position. And I think that the final thing is, would you guys pay the fees? I go to London, I go to towns and cities down the country. Nobody taxes their locals on green space like we do in Northampton. It's like an obsession with parking. And I think I've got to the point now where I can't be bothered. I can't take it anymore. And like I said, I don't live in town anymore, but I've experienced it, and it's rapid. The decline in this town is directly linked to parking and the obsession with gaining more money from parking. And to be honest, I'm fed up with it. I've had enough. We've been blanked on other emails. This is why I'm directing most of the stuff at you, Councillor Lara. We've literally been blanked with you this year. You're the deputy leader of this town, I thought. If you agreed to meet with us last year, this year you took on this, and you can't say anything yet unless it's below you that. So yeah, if I could just have some answers to those questions, that would be fantastic. I'm sorry I spoke too long, but that's what happened.
That's the problem, Mark. You probably speak a little longer. The big responses on that, which probably should be about. So you sent emails about Holson First.
Yeah, yourself as well.
Yeah, and I've seen that the planning officer is due to put a formal response. Well, the question I've asked is, some of it I think is North West Relief Road. Some of it though is commercial. It's a commercial forestry operation. For the 50 odd years I've walked through there on a regular basis, periodically spaces are cleared.
So what are we talking about? Forestry?
Holson First.
Holson First. I go back to Holson First.
Yeah, I'm just mentioning, but from my perspective, that's why we're waiting to formally get confirmation of that. But I think that might be part of.
I think it's the 1,800 trees that have been taken down off land. We've
Yeah,
got a conversation about this. We're in a road next to it, which you could have actually gone around, and you could could develop that. I mean, we've gone there. We've requested Bill meters there. We've requested yourself meters there. But there's a cul-de-sac at the end where you can see where you've ruined their view. And actually, the house on the end there now for sale. Actually, funny enough, since it's all that, I'm going to.
And I think that's why we're waiting for a proper formal report, because I don't think you can just take road.
No, I don't need to turn up there and have a look and see what they've done. The vandalism of 1,800 trees that were off plan.
Yeah, but we didn't design the road, so we'll find out from those that did design the road why they took that route, Mark, and we
It's
will
off
share
plan.
with you.
Off plan. Yeah, it's on. There's no public consultation. We've requested. It's a section 38 that's been put in retrospectively. We've not been given a sign off. You did the sign off, and if someone on this council, someone knows, but we have been flooded with 600 documents and files. And you know what? We know what's going on, but I'm not going anywhere. Myself and Jake Blackburn is here, but we're not going anywhere. Like, so just like face up to us and answer the questions. We're only asking really, really simple questions.
Okay.
But we have literally been ignored this year.
Well,
Myself as well.
my intention for reacting to that was to make you aware that we are looking at it. My understanding is we're waiting for that detail. Did you want to comment quickly on that one, Stuart? I wonder if I should have opened that one up, but it was at that you were signaling to comment on.
All I was going to say, Chairman, as I understand it, Holston Firs issue is a planning matter. Planning officers are looking at it. Nicky Scaife is currently writing a report, and that will be due in the coming weeks, and that will hopefully explain the whole situation.
Will it explain why you're not deciding to meet us now? Because you were going to meet us, remember? You got an email.
We haven't decided we're not, but we haven't decided we are. So we will see the report and take it from there.
No, we should. No, because 1,800 trees have been taken down without consultation.
Yeah.
And now that's subject to section 38.
Can I just say, I've lived in Northampton all my life. I've used Holston Firs all my life. And Holston Firs has regularly had stripped areas of it, stripped of trees. every year, going back to when I was a kid. It's a working forest.
Yes, and
It
there's
is
a big
working
road that's gone
forest.
through the middle of it.
And yes,
You obviously don't know anything about it.
I'm not going to get into this.
And the Northwest Relief Road there,
It is a
there
working
was
forest.
2,000 homes. It's a badly needed homes. And if we don't deliver the homes, Mark, we lose control of road
But
planning.
then go around the forest like it's on the original
So-
2018 plan.
Proposal now, and I regret possibly getting to this, I'll try not to reassurance. We'll get the report and then assure me, because we'll understand the full detail of what it is. But at the moment, I'm slightly shooting for them. I can come out and look at trees and look at roads all day with you, and I happily do that. But what I can't tell you is why it was done, so we will do that. And to assure you it's in the process.
Why, who signed up to section 38, who got the relevant permissions, and why it was done in a completely different way to the 2018 plan. Why is it, you could have gone to like 200, 300 yards to the left, and it would have gone through the industrial estate.
Yeah.
If it didn't really gone through.
And the question has been asked why it's happening. We'll get the report and then we'll discuss. I've got to cut it at that, Mark, I really have. But we'll get the report, and on that, that's not an agenda item, but that's what we'll do. We've got a number of other speakers on this, and then we'll sweep up on some of the points made. So our council colleagues is Councillor Parker, in this order: Councillor Parker, Humphries, Randall, Russell, Elwer, Harvey. So Kevin, over to you first.
Thank you, Chair. The Cabinet will be aware I submitted a motion last year at full council regarding the pricing regime for country parks at Daventry and Brixworth. I'm pleased to see that the pricing structure at both parks have now been addressed in this report. As the leader, deputy leader and councillor Larratt are aware, Cecile Irving-Swift and myself have been haranguing them for most of last year on parking charges for the parkrun participants, where at Brixworth they needed to pay £3.50 for broadly 1 hour. The proposal to change a season ticket for a potential 35 runs per year at £5 must be considered the value and supports the health and well-being agenda of the council. I would have liked to see a parking concession at the 2 country parks for the disabled, as I believe accessibility should be for everybody. I totally support these proposals, although I would like the Cabinet to review the change, or the charge, I should say, for disabled parking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. So next then, Councillor Humphries, Rosie, and you.
Thank you. 2 members of the public who've heard this evening have spoken very powerfully, and I would urge Cabinet members to reconsider the decision on commencing charging for the racecourse car park and to question whether local residents have been truly consulted on this. Overall, thank you for the report. Simplifying parking charges in our country parks is certainly overdue, and any payment system will be a significant improvement. So purchasing paper tickets is not convenient. And certainly at Brixworth, the machines are often out of operation. The proposal for a £5 parkrun season ticket will be excellent value for those who participate in this. However, for non-park runners, it's concerning that the council may in effect deter residents from using the parks by increasing charges, and this will be discouraging to physical activity and recreation. For example, Daventry currently for all day is £2.20. It's proposed to go up to £12. Brixworth up to 8 hours from £5.50 to £8. And as regards the 2-hour charge, £3, that's actually more than what's proposed to charge in Northampton. I suggest there should be parity between town and country for 2-hour parking. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rosie. Councillor Randall, Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. I would request that you defer this proposal and get some more evidence. It seems you're saying that people are parking in the racecourse to walk to town. It's about a 20-minute walk. I could think of many more places that are free and much nearer to town. And whenever I go across the racecourse and park in the car park, I've sat in the car and I've been on Teams meeting in that car park,
and people generally that are using the park and coming back to the car park. You know, when there is an issue with parking all around those streets, where are they supposed to go? People aren't going to be able to afford to pay for overnight parking every night in that car park if they can't get parked on the street. And I totally agree that green spaces is the one thing that we've heard all through COVID about improving your mental health, was to get out into the fresh air, get out into the parks. It's just awful. As far as the country parks go, both of those country parks were under the old DDC council, and that is for the parking charges that were introduced. I think Daventry Country Park at the moment is £2.20, and I agree, a lot of people won't park, they won't pay to park, and if they are forced to pay to park, already they spill over into the streets. I've been asking people, what, you know, would they be prepared to pay? They say no. There's fishermen that fish in that country park. I don't know any other fishing lake that actually charges more to park than it does to fish. £12 to pay to park to go fishing just seems just beyond me. I went down to the seaside in the summer. I can park all day in a car park at the seaside, walk down the ramp onto the beach, £5, and yet £12 to park all day in a country park. Absolutely astronomical. I just do not understand why. AMPR, is that, are we operating that, or is that a private company? Because that doesn't actually say that. So I presume it would be us operating that and us generating the tickets. And if that is the case, when you look at how much it is to install those cameras, you know, £144,000 for 3 cameras, you could employ someone. You could employ someone to sit in a hut and get money off people. Why don't we just have a simple barrier or something? Why isn't, if you are going to pay, why don't you just have a flat rate of £1? People might pay £1. There's no way people are going to pay that sort of money. We're already being hit with every other charge. Our council tax is going up, police and crime commissioner rates are going up, parish council rates are going up, and now you want to hit us with charges. No, I totally agree with the previous speaker that it's just terrible. We cannot keep putting up charges like this just to fill a hole. And on the Facebook page, it actually has a quote, and it quotes Councillor Larratt, and it said, increasing fees enables us to invest in our car parks. So we are charging people to park in the car park to invest in the car park. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Daventry District Council invested loads in Daventry Country Park and extended the car park. Car park's fine, there's nothing wrong with the car park, don't need to invest in the car park. So I've got real concerns that all you'll be doing, I don't know where you've got your figures from of how much an additional will be generated, because you're just going, you don't know how many people use the car park because you've already said people don't pay. So you've got no idea how many people use that car park. So I don't know where you've got those figures from, and you will see less and less people parking in there. So you actually might generate far less than what it's going to cost you to install those cameras. And if you have to use a smartphone, there are people, like my dad might drive down there and take the grandchildren down there. He doesn't have a smartphone. So what does that rule him out from parking in there? I just think you need to defer this, take it back, look at it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Catherine Russell, Councillor Russell, Catherine.
Yes, good evening. I'd written out a speech which I thought would be a one-off and a very useful speech, but all I can say is I support everything everybody else has said.
Okay.
As part of the St George team, 3 of us, none of us were advised, consulted or told that the green space in the middle of our beautiful ward was about to be monetised. Not to mention the fact that people in the surrounding areas have come to us and said, what is going on? Why didn't you stop this? How many cars do you think is now going to be parking along the residential streets blocking up, creating traffic chaos. Can you imagine a man with a buggy and a couple of small children trying to cross Kitchen Road to get onto the race course because she couldn't take her car in there or didn't want to pay for the charges? It's unacceptable. It is completely unacceptable. And I think this report should be pulled. There is no basis, you cannot justify. You say, oh yes, well, there's people parking there because they walk into town. There's no justification, you've got no evidence of that at all. And until you have for the race course, I think this whole policy, this whole issue should be shelved. And I personally, I'm very embarrassed to be part of a local authority that I've been elected to and trying to represent people with a sense of any sense of integrity. I think this is just the most dreadful thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, and finally, Councillor Wahabi.
Thank you, Chair. Our speakers have already said it all. The only thing I would say, because I could think to say that the only thing left is, please don't look at this proposal in business mind only. Consider it from point of compassion also. Thank you.
Very much. Okay, Phil, so sweep up on some of these comments and observations have been made.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do have a problem with the racecourse car park. This was being brought to our attention by our own park wardens, who have repeatedly been saying, what are you going to do about the racecourse car park? Because users of the racecourse can't use it, owing to the fact that it's being used by workers throughout the day. Similarly, local businesses have been complaining about the fact that residents can't park in the car park, particularly in the evening, because there is chock-a-block, visitors to the nighttime economy and restaurants, etc., can't park in the car park because it's blocked up with full-time parking by whoever. And I think whether it be residents or workers or whatever. So we've clearly got a problem, and we've got to make the car park work for what it's there for. It's there for people using the racecourse and possibly nearby businesses at night. It is a problem, and it has got to be addressed. And let's not forget, car parks have overheads. We pay business rates on car parks. We pay water, sewerage charges on car parks and car parking spaces. So those costs have to be covered. They're not free. Don't think just making a car park is free is simple because there's no cost involved. There is significant cost involved in operating a car park, and overheads are significant. So don't think we're just monetarising it. We've got costs. We need to recover those costs in many respects and make sure that the park is used for its proper purposes. I think, Kevin, for his kind comments. I do think we need to look at disabled parking in Brixton and Daventry, but we'll come back to that perhaps at a later date. Wendy said that Brixworth and Daventry both came under whichever council it was, Daventry. Well, Brixworth Country Park was a county council facility, not a Daventry District Council facility, as Daventry was. And, you talk about the cost of going to fish at individual fishing lakes. Well, don't forget you have to pay an extortionate amount to become a member to fish in the fishing lakes such as those at Hayford and places like that. So, it isn't cheap to do that. Yes, ANPR would be us, and the cost of installing the machines is primarily a one-off cost. Yes, it will probably cover the cost of a bloke sitting in the hut for 12 months, but then what happens after 12 months? Your costs go up because you've extinguished the benefits of it. I think the quote you mentioned, invest in car parks. Now, what I said was, by charging, we will be able to invest in parks, not in car parks, in parks. So that is completely a wrong quotation, whoever has written that.
you said about smartphones. No, if you look at the papers that talks about this, and the one we had to cabinet previously when we were looking at car parks, it did tell you how the ANPR machines work. You can use your debit card, you can use mobile phone, you can use all sorts of different ways. So it's not purely and simply a smartphone issue. It's very simple to use. Debit cards, I say, chip and pin, whatever. And not only that, as I say, yes, there will be an app, and there may be people reluctant to use the app. But by using the app, you can actually register your card and drive in and out. You just get charged every time you go. It's a bit like I use the dark crossing quite regularly. I register every time I drive across. I automatically get debited for it. This is exactly the same sort of thing we're looking at. But the principle, Mr. Chairman, is that there is a problem. We have to address it, and we think this is the way to do that. I hear what the residents say, and yes, there may be an opportunity to look at a resident's nighttime charge, and it may be possible, yes, to revisit a resident's parking scheme elsewhere. So that's why I'm proposing, Mr. Chairman, an amendment to the recommendations, indicating that we will review the scheme after 6 months, and we will look at those issues of a nighttime charge for local residents, and also to look at the issue of junior fund runs. So that is an additional recommendation. And also, as I said earlier, we have in paper it says that park run season ticket would only apply to specific parks. I'd like to put another amendment to the recommendation that park run season tickets will be valid at each location. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Quite interesting comments about residents' parking schemes. We know our terrace streets were not made in the area of the motor car. They're not always ever popular everywhere, and I think there's a consultation which has to be done before one, isn't there? You think, gents who spoke, that there would be strong interest? I get your point about having to walk some distance back to a home, which can be disconcerting and a security risk. You think there would be a strong desire from residents around Hood Street, surrounding streets, to extend Mr. Smith, the parking scheme, the residents' parking scheme?
I'm speaking on behalf of my son.
Yeah.
The best that I get from the story that there is that the parking is never going to be sufficient to meet the residents' demand, and we can't change that. And when you live on the mount, buy a place on the mount, that's a decision you take with your own hands when you go. It's enforcing change through initiatives such as this. Is just knocking everybody for six. I've never heard of being asked possibly to pay extra to park somewhere away from your house where you have free parking on the road outside because of another scheme. It's forcing pressure into a place that they can't take it.
Yeah.
And resident parking schemes, they do have their merits.
Yes.
I'm not advocating, it needs to be studied. I would have, never advocated anything more than to study as to what the practicality would be.
Yeah.
There are some schemes on the edges of the house for residents parking.
Yeah.
Why not look at that?
It gives you, as a resident, preferential opportunity to park somewhere near your home. Stuart, what's going on that and what the process is and whether it's something we should consider getting this consultation on?
Well, just in relation to the racecourse and the area around the racecourse, obviously there were a number of, and Mr. Smith actually identified a number of issues that were relevant to that area. And it is an area where we are focusing on. So I do know there will be a consultation on CCTV because of some of the other social behaviour and issues with the support of the police. I do know we're looking at some of the housing issues, etc., etc. So it is an area that the council is very much focused on, and an area there whereby I'm sure in the very, very near future we'll be out to talk to residents and talk to businesses of the area about what more we can do in that particular area. So again, I know the focus of this particular paper is about a car parking charge, but it's probably missing that wider appreciation of what we are actually looking at within the area to support not just the residents, not just the security, but also the work. And again, there will be other papers coming forward that starts to pick up on some of the initiatives we're looking at within the parks to enhance the facilities, etc. Abington Park, as you know, is one where we've just secured significant investment in terms of changing rooms, etc., etc. So I do think it is a peer, but unfortunately, that just focuses on one particular issue, where there's a much wider context of investment and support for the residents and for sport and our parks in general as we go forward. So again, it's unfortunately we in hindsight we didn't have that context here.
Okay, thank you. You probably wrap this up soon, but do you want to make a quick contribution?
Okay, if I
Yeah.
can, please.
Yeah, go on.
I was leaving to my colleagues speak. I didn't want to have so many people and Stuart should made the case for the reason this report should be pulled and deferred. He just made the case himself for that. We absolutely have Councillor Larratt's proposed amendments that he's not even clear on. We're not clear whether it's a park run or a fun run or a jog or a, can I go on the fun run and then get the £5 parking? It's not clear, so it'd be sensible to pull the report. You asked the gentleman a question about consultation on street parking and sorry, permit parking. That's something that's open, but it's open to consultation. All of these things should have been done before this report come forward. So I just wanted to join my colleagues in calling for this report to be pulled this evening and redetermined, and Cabinet can do that.
Okay, thank you. I think you have spoken on this. I think we probably ought to move forward with it now. Any other cabinet comments or questions?
Can I just clarify, Chairman, the amendments for those that haven't understood what I have said. The amendment is to include a recommendation saying that we will review the situation after 6 months, and during that 6 months, we will look at issues that have been raised tonight, such as the suggestion that was put forward for a residence nighttime permit, and we will also look at how we deal with the junior park run events. In addition to that, the park run season tickets that we are offering will be valid at each location. They will be valid across the 3 locations, not just at the individual location in which they're purchased. That's the amendment, Chair. Just to be clear.
Right, so the amendment said. So we've got that in front of us. I have some concerns about this. I do know that we have traditionally, I don't know if we still do, we charge less at the multi-storey car park further out, so if you walk up the deco and use St Michael's, you pay less daily, and that's to keep the shoppers turning around in town centre spaces, so people will walk for reduced cost. And I know some anecdotal evidence of that happening. We'll review this and we'll review this properly during that 6 months. I think my own view is to go with it. It absolutely has to. They have an alternative to park, there is no cost. There is something about harmonising across this as well. So it's a difficult one, but I would suggest that we do that consultation, we do that parking permit review, we do all the things that we're going to take over to do here, see if we can have regular sympathy. It's difficult when something changes. Just going to answer that monetised one, because if you throw it as like something dirty, every day, vulnerable people, old people, young people, people in need of temporary accommodation, all sorts of care come to us. And the way we cover that is partly through council tax, but inflation is 10%, council tax, we can put up 5%, so that don't cut it. Fees and charges, we've had to look at every single penny we charge every single person, and at every single penny that we spend. So there's nothing dirty about fees and charges and what we are required to do about it. It's not monetising parks or any other sort of, headline grabbing phrases that you might want to use. Where there is money that's coming in, it goes to good purposes, which is our services and so on. But this one we will review in the way that we promised, and ask any cabinet member if you've got any further comment, question, query on this. If not, we've heard Phil's recommendations, amendments to recommendations. I think we've had everybody chip in on this way. So at this point, I'm asking you just confirm your agreement to those recommendations. Agree. Thank you. Takes us on to item 18, which is the.
Yeah, can I just understand that it's getting done?
Yeah.
Right, getting ready for
Okay. Item
You're not listening to a word, guys.
18 is capital expenditure relating to the rebuild of Windflower Place. This one is with Adam. Adam, we have. No, we don't have any speakers on this one at all. It's over to you. Just to introduce it.
Well, thanks, and stand up, get ready.
Yeah, sorry, the report's written in Adam's name on it, though. It's fine. No, happy to. This is an urgent decision then that required us to rebuild the property covered by the council self insurance rather than delay. We felt that the important thing to do was to take the decision so we could proceed with the rebuilding. Okay, so what we're being asked to do is to note the fact that we took that decision under urgent decision making. The queries, Mike.
Just one comment really, because I did declare an interest at the start. It's only a personal interest because the matter of somebody approaching me with a piece of casework. But the owner of the neighbouring property lives in my ward and he has tenants in there. My plea, and I've previously made this plea to the relevant director, is that we communicate fully with all of the neighbouring properties to ensure that the timescales are clearly outlined as to what we're going to follow, because it does seem to have been some confusion and mixed messages on how long it's going to take. So just some clear indication with all of the neighbouring properties in that street would be really helpful.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Any other comments, questions on this one? No, pretty straightforward, isn't it? So recommendations agreed? Okay. So one final item, which is item 20. And I don't think this is the public part of this is that. Right, so the report that's about to come with us is operated in private session, that's without public press. There, we do that very rarely. We do that for a wanted reason, which is in the event that the press and the public remain in the meeting, there is a risk of disadvantaging the value that we can achieve for the public purse. As a result of that, we would declare that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that if the public were present, it would likely be that exempt information under paragraph 3, part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act would be disclosed to them. Just going to ask you to confirm you agree that we move into private session. Is that agreed?